Thank you everyone for joining in to the Crypto Khalsa. First again, Sat Sri Akal for all the viewers. Today's special guest is the guy who first created the first line of code that Caspa has ever seen. Mike, welcome to our podcast and pleasure having you. Let's start off this podcast with some of the personal questions that we normally ask our hosts. So, tell me a bit about your background, Mike. Where are you from natively?
Mhm.
Your educational background, and what do your parents and siblings do?
All right. So I was born in Moscow in 1986. I've been living there up until almost 6 years old, and then we moved with all the family to Israel. We did an aliyah, uh, and I've been growing up in Jerusalem ever since. Well, up until my adulthood. Um, my parents were mathematicians. My father was a programmer. My mother was a math teacher. Father had a PhD in geophysics. Mother had a master's degree in applied mathematics. We were a very mathematical, physical family. We we've solved geometrical problems at the dinner table. We didn't have much feelings though. We were very Soviet and very scientific. My brother, I have one older brother. He's a year and a half older than I am. He is a programmer, and I grew up to be a programmer. Um, and that's what kind of predetermined. And I liked it a lot. I really enjoy my programming, and uh, like I'm not angry at the predetermination, but predetermined it was. I I was bullied quite a lot at school, especially in elementary school. I was like the geek that talked about stuff that nobody understood. I thought about everybody as like stupider than myself. I guess I was right, but like it's not a nice thought. Uh,
That's how the other world lives.
yeah,
Let's
but
see
I
how
was
the
like
other
all
world.
mathematics and like be smart, and everybody were thinking about things that kids think about. I was really into computer games though. I would spend all my life playing computer games, but my parents really restricted that. So I had like half an hour a day, and that's all I wanted ever to do. But then there was a loophole that if you study programming, you can sit in front of the computer beyond that half hour. So I entered into programming quite early. I think like in third grade, my dad tried to teach me Java. I didn't understand much, but he tried. And then, like at seventh grade, I asked my mother to send me to some private teacher, and he taught us Pascal. And like in 11th grade already, I was teaching the teacher what she was supposed to teach us. I really liked it. I was like into small scale hacking. I just loved the feeling of like entering a computer. I entered strong into the FXP scene. We were hacking servers, uploading like pirated movies and that stuff. And then like making it public so that everybody can download the pirated movies from the hacked servers. It felt like I was 18 and I did stuff that like my dad was unable to do, and I was so proud of myself. Um, and then like it was clear that when I grow up, I'm gonna be a programmer. I both enjoyed that a lot. I really loved that. That was most of my life, and it made a lot of money. So why not? Um, I did have this hobby of music all the time nevertheless, but I guess on that we'll talk later. Um, but yeah, it was all about science. It was all about. I remember this time when in high school you have to take two majors. It's not exactly the major they have in the university, just like two subjects that you study more than like everybody else. I wanted to take biology and computers. My parents were angry at me that it wasn't computers and physics because these are the only two options that should be available. Yeah, I wanted to take music, but like saying I want to take music, that was out of the question.
So in our culture as well, so you first become an engineer, then you can do whatever you want. I mean, this is what in our Indian culture as well.
Yeah,
This is, I think, this is common throughout the world.
yeah,
It's about traditions, right? You either become a doctor or an engineer, and then you decide whatever you want to do.
yeah, indeed, indeed. Actually, it's not in every culture like that. Like the Israelis over here, many of them, especially the ones from like more Eastern countries, they're not like that. Like the kid can do what he feels like doing. Like, yeah, make your mama proud, but you don't have to be a doctor or like a lawyer, as it's like in Ashkenazi Jewish families. And then you can become a programmer, but it's like it's not traditional yet because it's so new. But yeah, you have to bring a lot of money, and otherwise your parents will be disappointed at you, and nobody wants that. But I must say that I always followed my passions. I never like it coincided with what my parents wanted, but I never did anything because like I was told to do that. I just really enjoyed programming and the sort of programming that I was doing.
What did you really aspire to become in childhood? Have you achieved your dreams?
Well, I think I'm not a person of like long-term dreams. I like when I dream big. I dream about like everything. I want to be God, not God, but like the next thing that is attainable below that. But you can't really strive for that, or I don't know. So uh, my dreams are small. I knew I loved programming. I wanted to be a programmer. I thought I'll be programming. I kind of wanted to program games back then, like any gamer kid would. But yeah, it was all about the programming. I never thought about music as anything you can do professionally. Uh, I always wanted like to be heard. That's I think why I did music. I had some crazy ideas in my head, and I wanted to let them out. So I recorded at home some crap music and like spread it to the world, and like people listened, and I like that. When you're programming, nobody listens to you, only the computer. But I never like thought it's going to be anything big in my life.
Hmm. And how does Mike describe himself? Is he an extrovert or is he an introvert? And how do you chill? Like, how do you hang out? Do you hang out with friends at home, sipping drinks? What's your chilling routine?
Okay, so first about introvert or extrovert, I think it's like an interesting thing because, like, well, I'm definitely an introvert. No questions asked. Like, I'm within myself, and but I have a suspicion that I was born an extrovert, and life forced me into this, how to call it, seclusion within myself, which brought a lot of introspection. And eventually, I grew up to be an introvert. But I really enjoy attention. I really love being the center of attention, although I'm kind of afraid of it. And I think that, like, if given like a free childhood, I would have been really extroverted.
So most of the introverts, I would say, are projectedly selectively extrovert. They don't like talk with everyone,
Yeah,
so selectively extrovert, but technically they are extroverts, but they are only extroverts with like selected amount of people. They don't like open up with everyone. Is that the same case with you?
Yeah, I can really relate to that. I open up to quite a lot of people. Like my definition of a person that I would like to open up to him is if that person loves me. And it's but really loves me. It's like not like the superficial me. If like I show him myself, will he love me? And if the answer is yes, then yeah, I'll definitely show you myself. And I really enjoy doing that. So I have quite a lot of friends, quite a lot of close friends, quite a lot of friends that I talk on a daily or weekly basis, even many ones that are not really close to me geographically. Uh, and I make friends anywhere I go. But it always takes me some time. I can't just come into a crowd and like mingle with people. That brings up a lot of anxiety, and I'm not good at that. Approaching people is particularly hard for me. But once I am approached, people usually find me very open, and maybe like oversharing is the word to use here. But I don't think there's such thing as oversharing. Like if it's true and if it's about me and like I'm not disclosing anybody else's secrets, I have no shame. I can tell you everything, up to the excruciating details if you want to listen. I'm not sure you do, but if you want, I will tell you. Um, yeah, so how I have this couple of friends. The girl I know from, well, basically from elementary school, but we are best friends since high school. And then her partner, well, they are together since high school, so I know him as well. We come to this place where I sit right now. It's like my studio. I'm sure we have like the setup with drums, and we have big amps, and we jam. We jam maybe like three times a week, like in a good week. Uh, so we play a lot of music, and that's kind of what we do.
That's an interesting background out there, like that green alien, and then there's the horror movie characters. Like, can you tell me more about it?
So, like when I came here, it's kind of like an underground bunker. It was like a storage place for a bank that was upstairs. So the walls were really ugly, and I'm not like a decoration person. I just know it's ugly. So I was telling people, I'm not gonna tell you what to do. Just like take a paintbrush and do whatever. Like bring the paints also. I don't know which paints to bring, or tell me what to buy. I can provide the money. Just like come and make it pretty. So different people were like doing different paintings. We have quite a few already. And like the black and white one, it's actually I don't know him. He wasn't there when I was here, but it's like he's a painter. That's what he does for a living. So he was here like for a jam, and he painted this thing.
How long have you known Shy for, and what kind of bond do you guys share?
So I can't really answer the first question because I remember Shy since I remember like myself being like a grown up person. I guess somewhere around high school, we well we had this small society of like role player metalheads. Uh, there aren't that much of them in Israel, and we had like a certain vibe. It's like not all role player metalheads would qualify. Yeah, so uh, I was in Jerusalem, Desha was in Tel Aviv, but we were visiting each other's cities quite a lot. And then at a certain point, Deshe moved to Jerusalem for his studies. He started studying in the Hebrew University, where he's completing his PhD these days, or I think he has just completed it. And then we became really good friends. There were years where we had like him, myself, and a couple more friends. We sat like close to every day at my place. We're listening to music and playing Towerfall. And then we were playing a few more games, but that was mostly Towerfall. Like for a couple of years, it was only Towerfall. Uh, and yeah, I got to know him quite well at this time. Up till this day, we were very close friends. Whenever there's something new in Caspa, I hear that from him. Um, but it's a funny story how we both ended up in Caspa because he brought me to Caspa and then I brought him to Caspa. The thing was,
Okay, so who bought who first? Like he bought you first, and then you bought him later on.
he brought me first. Yeah, back in 2018, I think. I have here like yeah. I was sitting. We were talking about crypto. I was really deep into crypto for quite a while. And like I was the friend that knew everything about crypto, so everybody came to ask questions. And Desha was there, and he already knew the answers, but he was listening all of the time because we were hanging out like on a daily basis. And then one time he says like he has this friend that is strong in crypto. He does his PhD on crypto, and he will make a coin. And I had a good job. I didn't need a job, but I jokingly asked him, "Does he need like a programmer?" So I said, "You know what? I'll ask him." I was okay, whatever. Uh, and a few days later, he comes and says, "Yeah, well, they're making that coin, and yeah, they need a programmer. Do you want to talk to him?" So it was okay. And then I met with Jonathan, and we talked quite a while, and I started working for DAG Labs. The name Caspa didn't exist back then. And at a certain point, we needed somebody to write the specification of Caspa. Or back then, we just called it the coin. We didn't know how to call it. We used just the coin. And that was a problem because there are people whose specialty is to write specifications, but none of them will understand half of what we're doing. So I came up with the name Shaidesh. Like, let him write the spec. Secretly knowing that, like, he's not coming here to write the spec. Let's be serious. Come on, he's coming to be a thinker. But like, we needed somebody to write the spec, and he's qualified, and I think it will be fun for him. So let's bring him to write the spec. So we brought him to write the spec. His job was a spec writer. He never completed that spec. After a few weeks, Jonathan had some question that he needed somebody to think about with. So Shai joined him, and since then he's a researcher.
Mhm. So let's take the timeline to a bit earlier times. Why blockchain over any other space or domain? Since when have you been like working into blockchain, and how did you really start in this space?
Yeah, so back I think 2013, more or less, we needed to get our weed, and it was hard to get weed in Israel. So somebody said something about the Silk Road, so I checked that out, and we did get our weed by mail, and it was like the best weed we ever saw in Israel back then, and it was super cheap. So we started getting more weed from the Silk Road, and you bought the weed with Bitcoin back then. So I bought some Bitcoin and I started reading about it. And I really liked the ideology. I really liked the idea of banking the unbanked. And
So technically, weed made you come into Bitcoin,
yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely, no questions asked. I wouldn't have gotten there otherwise. I was into security and like I heard about it, but I would never buy Bitcoin. Uh, I would never like go into reading about that if that wasn't for weed. Um, so and I really like the value proposition of like money that is free from countries and that is free from central banks. and that is usable by everyone on the globe equally. And that really bought me. And then I went to read the white paper, and I went into the technology, and I really liked how it's quite a simple idea. It's like it's not simple in the sense that it's easy to understand, but it doesn't require much prior knowledge to understand how proof of work and the Bitcoin security works. So I really like that, and I digged all into that. Um, and that was a lot of fun, and it was really interesting to me. And then altcoins began popping up. First Litecoin, and then all the rest of the clone coins. And I was really into, I don't know, maybe, I was quite young. I think I was just finished the army. Uh, or maybe even before that. No, it was after the army because I didn't smoke weed in the army. Yeah, so after the army, but not long after the army. Um, uh, and I started mining like all those shit coins. I had this trick that a lot of VPS providers still didn't get caught up with like crypto mining, so they didn't have that in the terms and condition. Anybody who was caught up forbade mining, but there were the ones that they were like just starting up, so they gave you like a machine for $5, and then you can mine for like a few days until they ban you, and you make some shitcoin. It could be like a substantial sum of a shitcoin during those few days. I guess it wasn't very ethical, but that's what I did. Um, yeah, and then like I got really. I finally stopped doing that. It hasn't become financially viable pretty quickly, but I learned a lot about crypto back at the time. I really started to understand how this thing works. And then I kind of forgot about it for a few years.
Hmm.
But then suddenly I realized I have quite a lot of money in Bitcoin. Like I had like a few coins lying around, but now it's quite a lot of money. Let's check how much it's worth, and I like figure I have like a few 100,000 shekels, which was quite a sum for me back then. And I started getting interest in what's going on again. With all the coins, Ethereum was already a thing. And smart contracts were playing out, and I'm ashamed to admit that I got into day trading like big time. I was into all those stickers. All my life was just like sets of 3 letters that you don't know anything about. But you bought that and you hope it will go up because some dude on the internet told you it's gonna happen. And it was a lot of excitement. I like my heart was racing every time I got a new ticker. It was crazy, but it was like totally useless and a waste of my time, and I hardly made any money. Maybe I even lost money on that. There was a big crash happening exactly at the time when I got in, so it wasn't the time to do that. But it was a lot of fun, and I gambled with small amounts, so I was fine. But anyway, back then, I think it was 2016, more or less, the block size wars were raging. Um, there was this thing that Satoshi Nakamoto has limited the Bitcoin block size to 1 megabyte as a temporary measure against spam, citing that we will increase it when time comes. Well, time came, and suddenly some powerful people do not want to increase the block size. While the community in its majority did want to increase the block size, at least temporarily, there were good arguments against increasing it indefinitely, and we did need to find a better solution. But many people believed that as a temporary solution, we should increase it. to something that will permit growth. Um, and over this seemingly stupid like constant, uh, we saw that the community of Bitcoin fractured. Uh, and what bothered me even more than the block size itself is that you could see there are two ideologies ruling Bitcoin. One wanted Bitcoin to be money for the people, something that can be used as money in day-to-day life, that you can go to the supermarket, that you can order pizza with. And the other half was content with the store of value thing. I remember core developers citing, we don't need it to be like money for the people. This should be a reserve currency for states. And like what I heard is we want to keep the money for the first comers, and it doesn't need to grow anymore. We just need to store the value that we got by being the first to adopt this technology. Uh, and like for me, it was a benefit because I was among those people that were first to adopt this technology. But like that's not why we got here. We wanted to bank the unbanked. We wanted to make a difference in the world. We didn't want like another tool for the rich to become richer.
Yeah.
Um, However, the core developer crowd were all against block size increase. There was this company, Blockstream, I'm not sure if they're around anymore, that paid the salaries of most core developers, and they were really against it. Suddenly, the Bitcoin subreddit is censored, and you cannot talk about the block size anymore. You can only express like ideas against increasing the block size. Um, and it all really, really stank. Um, and back then, I had this idea of like how I want my perfect coin to look. Uh, Ideologically and technologically, I didn't know how to achieve it. I knew it had to scale enormously. I knew there's still a lot of work to be done, but I wanted it to be like the prime goal. And like back at the time, it was ridiculous. In Scaling Bitcoin conference, it was forbidden to talk about scaling Bitcoin. Uh, so uh, I was really looking in for like the savior. I hoped that like Ethereum with their proof of stake plans would achieve that. They did seem like a serious bunch. But at a certain point, you kind of feel that, especially it was coming from Vitalik, maybe not verbally, but that he kind of doesn't believe that vision himself. He has to go with it, but something is wrong about that vision. It wasn't put to words.
Hmm.
The proof of stake, you couldn't really believe in that yet. We know that proof of work works. Proof of stake, there were too much questions about it back then.
Correct.
Um, and then I had this occasion where I met with Jonathan, and he tells me that he wants to build that coin that I'm dreaming about, and he has the know-how and like the technical ability to do that because he has Phantom, and that was just a match from heavens. And yeah, I've been working on that uh, up until the release.
That's the story of how Caspar really started out, and how you really got an inspiration
Mhm.
to start this code, because I think back then I think no one really wanted to scale Bitcoin, right?
No, there were people like the Bitcoin Cash crowd. They did want to scale Bitcoin. They just weren't that mainstream.
and everyone was like moving towards the ideology of proof of stake, which is still not, I would say, up to the mark, right? It
Yeah,
gives it asks a lot of questions, right? Whereas proof of work is something which is in the consensus, right? It's something
yeah,
which is given to you by Satoshi himself, and I think that's the first set of research that was done.
yeah,
Proof of stake is just another ideology,
yeah.
and I think that's the reason why Caspa is such an interesting project, where
Hmm.
proof of work is being scaled. And in future, Caspa is obviously developing their own smart contract framework, which
Yeah.
is, I think, it's going to be big.
It is going to be big. It's already bigger than I ever envisioned it to be. Although I did hope it to get big, but we were working in just three geeks and another geek in another room for quite a few
Absolutely.
years, and it didn't look like it's going to be anything anytime soon.
So, Mike, you are one of the first people in the Caspa's team. How do you like the direction where Caspa is headed, or would you like to make some amends?
So I must give a disclaimer that I'm not very updated with what's going on in Caspa. I do get occasional updates when something cool happens from Desha, but I'm not like actively reading what's going on. I do hear a lot of good stuff about the Rust implementation, which makes me really happy because, like I was telling you before, one of the first decisions we had to make was Go versus Rust, and I picked Go for the absolutely wrong reasons. Uh, we just like the Go implementation was MIT like license, and the Rust implementation, the parity Bitcoin was GPL. We don't want GPL. Let's go with the Go one. I also knew Go a little bit better. I didn't know Rust. I knew Go already. So yeah, let's go with the Go. And it feels like a sin for me, and then like somebody is making amends for that sin. So I really like that, and I also really like the results that they're getting. I really love the fact that it's still driven by this pure ideology of let's just make the best coin we can make without thinking about our short-term uh, profits or like any stakeholders or first movers or whomever. We just need to build the best coin there is, and I think it's still the ideology, and this is very important. This is what enabled Caspa to be as successful as it is, and the minds behind Caspa who still work there. If it's Mikhail Saturn, who is just like a brilliant person, like maybe the most brilliant person I have ever met.
I think he's the one who shifted from Go to Rust. A big shout out to Michael Sutton, guys.
Yeah,
He's the one who shifted the whole conversion from Golang to Rust. He's the guy who took care of the whole development.
yeah, he kind of when I was sick of like leading the development, he took this cross from me, and I'm really grateful about that as well. But I must say he's just like a brilliant thinker even before that. Many problems that seemed unsolvable, such as the reachability problem, he just sat there in his room and figured it out. He figured out Dagnite, which will bring like capabilities way further than even like 10 blocks per second would seem little. Um, so yeah, he's a brilliant person, and Elihei Turkel is a brilliant person, and of course Shai Deshe is one of the smartest people I know. I'm really happy this project is in their hands, and I really trust them to do the right decisions. I don't think that they can go wrong. I think they're so meticulous with what they do that there are just no better people. And if something happens in Caspa that I disagree with, I would say there's probably something I don't understand that they do, and that's they're doing that what they do.
So, Mike, let's go back in time. How did the initial discussion look like when Caspa was just an idea in thin air? And who actually coined the term Caspa?
Okay, so these are very two desperate questions timeline wise, because the name Caspa was envisioned. Well, I think Jonathan thought about it all the time. Caspa means, I think, either silver or money in Aramaic, which is the language of the Talmud, and like most of the Bible study in Hebrew, the traditional Bible study in Hebrew is in Aramaic, and Jonathan is a religious Jew, so it's very natural for him. The issue with the word caspa is that it means dandruff in Spanish. It's a caspa with a C, but nevertheless, and we had we had all those discussions. Everybody were throwing names. We were all very technical people. We are good at being creative when there is a problem to be solved. Uh,
And it is a time when ChatGPT was not around, so you had to do a lot of research by
yeah,
Googling
we
and
had
find.
this Eyal Yablonka. He's a good friend of mine. I know him from the army. I brought him. He was a product manager for a time, and he had these focus groups to come up with names. At a certain point, we just like sat one moment in a room. We said, "Fuck this, Caspa. We go with that. We can't waste any more time discussing this thing." And that was it. And it's a great name. I love that name. It makes a great logo. Um, and yeah, it was a great name. But regarding your first question, we'll have to go a few years back. Um, it was, I think, 2018 that I started working in Dag Labs. Um, and like Jonathan was very busy back then, just opening the company and all, finding funding, all that. So it gave me half a year. The first like 3 months, I was just studying Bitcoin. I woke up 9 hours. I was reading Beeps. I was reading discussions in Bitcoin Talk. I studied Bitcoin in and out. I became like Yoni told me, professionalize yourself in Bitcoin. So that's what I did. And then 3 more months, I was building this proof of concept where he specified Gosdag. He had this draft specification, which got amended a lot. But by the time it got to the paper, I wrote a proof of concept for it. It ran fantastically. Um, and meanwhile, we had this discussion about which language we should use. Now, Jonathan is a brilliant person in like crypto research and game theory and anything connected to that.
Mhm.
He is not a developer, but he was my only partner, so I talked with him, and it was usually me speaking my mind and he agreeing with whatever I say because, like, he was asking a lot of good questions, but he couldn't really give any meaningful input. He was a good rubber duck, though. He was a great rubber duck. I love using people as rubber ducks. They are way better than like actual rubber ducks because they ask questions. So I asked a lot of questions, and he made me think about a lot of like edge corners that I would miss. Um, and then we got a couple more programmers in our team. The first one was Stas Butenko. Uh, he joined. There was some startup that was closing down, and Jonathan somehow knew them. So we salvaged whatever talent we could. So we got the VP of R&D, and D, and we got the most talented programmer out of there. The VP of R&D, he was a good VP. He wasn't that technical. He could understand the crypto stuff. So he helped us set up the development process, and then he quit. That was the plan. He didn't plan to stay there. But Stas was a brilliant programmer. He was really good at taking the time, doing the whatever is needed. It doesn't matter if it's boring. Doesn't matter. It needs to be done, and it needs to be done carefully. Stas will do it carefully. And he was really curious. He wasn't into crypto before, but he was really curious about anything, and I just taught him about Bitcoin in like a couple of months, everything there is to know. The second guy that joined, that was Ori Newman. Him I knew from the Israeli Bitcoin Facebook community. Back then, the Bitcoin block size war was raging, and it was kind of me against everybody else. I was pro block size increase. I was pro Bitcoin Cash. Everybody else were aligning with the overlord. No, the core developers know the best. Miners suck. Miners hate us. With one exception, there was Ori Newman. He was pro Bitcoin Cash, and he was supporting me in those fights. And he was a great guy. And then when we're searching for programmers, suddenly I see somebody posting, Ori Newman won some crypto hackathon. So I say, okay, let's get this guy. I like him, and figures out he's a good programmer. So we talked to him. I back then had like this interview of, I think, 10 very hard questions that like hardly anybody was able to answer. Uh, but like for me, each question there, if you can answer it, you can't work for DAG Labs. You won't understand like what needs to be done. You might not know the answer, but you need to be able to figure out something, even if it's not the correct thing. But you need to start thinking. Ori was the only one who passed this test with flying colors. Then the VP of R&D interviewed him, and it was a flop. I'm not sure what happened there, but like the VP of R&D came out and said like, no, we can't work with this guy. He doesn't know anything. I remember it maybe one of my most proud moments. I said I put all my weight on this guy. Give him another chance. Like I never did that ever again. Like I said, fire me if he's bad. And we gave him another chance. And wow, it's a
He passed with flying colors.
yeah. Not only he was a great programmer, he also helped a lot with the research. I think the pruning project wouldn't have happened without him. He was like the pruning project required a lot of like researcher mind to figure out the thing, but then it also required a developer who can speak the researcher language, and that's not me, that's not Stas, that's Ori. So that was me, Stas, and Ori doing all the work for the first I think 3 years. And only closer to release Elichai Turkel. He back then was a Bitcoin Core developer. He joined to do like a few little things, and then he got sucked in. And Mikhail Saton came as a researcher. He came to help Jonathan do the thinking, and as mentioned, he solved quite a few sizable problems that really needed solving. But the first 3 years, it was quite hectic because Jonathan, as I said, he is a brilliant person. He's not built to lead a company. He never liked doing that. He always cited that he's terrible at it, and he was right. But he was the only one who was able to lead this company. We had a very high-profile CEO for a time, Si Zhao Zhang. He Among other things, was the CEO of Farmville at their startup phase. He was a brilliant person, but he couldn't work with Jonathan because they both were way too visionary, and like it was clear Jonathan has to lead this. So I had to do like making sure that like we do have a working prototype, a working test net. Um, so basically, I became from a team leader. I became the VP of R&D because we couldn't find any VP of R&D that would make the cut. Um, and we had all those open questions about how things are supposed to work. That came from the technology. It's like it's really nice that you solved sorting the blocks. Like, yes, it is a very important question. It's the most important question. We have Phantom, we have GhostDAG to solve this question. The fact that you have more than one parent complicates everything.
Absolutely.
Everything. Like one question that we had to deal with is how do you give the fees? In Bitcoin, the block knows which transaction it has. So it takes the fees for the transaction it includes. In Caspa, you can have a double spend in your block, so you're not going to get the transaction fees for this transaction. And even if it's not a strict double spend, you might have the same transaction that another block has, and that another block has higher precedence than you in GhostDAG order, so you're not getting the fee anyway. So you can pay your own fees. So what do we do? And we did come up with a solution. Eventually, we said that we came up with this concept of the accepting block, which is the chain block that puts all the transactions in your block in the selected chain. And that solved the problem, but it was quite a sizable problem. We had a very hard problem of how you update the UTXO set when you have more than one block. I had to come up with what we called back then UTXO algebra. Although Shaidesh later told me that's not an algebra, it's probably a UTXO calculus. But nevertheless, the algebra rolls better on your tongue, UTXO algebra, so I think it's sticked. And I had this document, I think 2 pages of open questions for Jonathan. And I remember half a year before testnet, I asked him, are you going to answer those questions anytime soon? And he says, no, I'm not. I don't have time for that. So that's how it was. He didn't have time for that. He had to run the company. He had to think about other questions that needed solving. He needed to think long term about how we do enable smart contracts and invest all that. Somehow, by the day testnet launched, all those questions were answered, and the code was like in place. But yeah, it was very hectic. It was not an easy job to do. That's why I got burned out.
So, about your burnout, let's move on to the next part of this podcast. Mike the programmer, transforming his journey, his face, his whole life algorithm into Mike the musician. So, tell us more about your musical journey. What inspired you really to dive into music?
So you make it very dramatic. For me, it was not as such. Like the realization was sudden, I must say. But then I realized that like I was going there big part of my life. So my music started at high school. I had this. I just connected the computer to the guitar to the computer and like did some black metal. And I had this joke band. It's called Ochelef Poth. It's some rowdy words in Hebrew. And I did quite a few songs like that, and they were like relatively popular to what they were worth. Like the 50 people that care about such things in Israel knew about it. It was that popular. um, Most of them were my friends or friends of friends, but it's that close. It's a small community. Um, uh, then later on in life, I dubbed into electronic music. Uh, I wasn't doing anything like really good quality wise. It was hardly polished, but I think I was kind of creative. I think creatively it was interesting. I'm sure it's very listenable to like the average ear because I never took the time to make it listenable to the average ear. But I think I had good ideas, and back at the time I sang in a few heavy metal bands of various quality, but we didn't have much recorded. The best thing we like the most successful band I had, it was called Maybong. It's like means literally bong water. We were doing thrash metal about weed, about smoking weed and all that. I had this one friend. I wrote the lyrics. I sent him the lyrics. He had some ideas in his head. He came to my house. He recorded guitars, bass, and drums, like making it up on the spot. Then I recorded vocals and we released the song. Sometimes we did like a video clips made of memes. Uh, then we had like 6 songs, so we recorded an album. We burned it. I had like CDs were way out of fashion already, but I had this old tower, like it was 50 CDs originally, but I had like 32 left. So we burned 32 CDRs. We I made a cover, so I printed these covers. I ordered from Alibaba 500 guitar picks. 500 was the minimum amount. I needed 32, but 500 was the 500 guitar picks with the logo of the band. Uh, and then there was like this tour of a little known Czech band that played the correct genre. So we distributed those CDs in the toilets of the store. And people just came to pee. They saw a CD, so they took it. So that was my most successful musical endeavor up till recently. But I was always doing music. I was always doing something. I had this term dank music. It's like music which is not polished, but like you like something about it. So it's like it's dank. It's like dank memes, but with music. And that's what I was doing. And then like when Caspa was close to release, we had these hard times when we did anything we could. We wrote solid code. We uh, had all the research done, like for the MVP, but the coding was over. Now you need to do QA. Now you need to do some marketing. Now you need somebody to write a specification, a white paper. Who's gonna do that? We don't have the talent. We have people that can do it mediocrely because like they like the project and they have the technical knowledge, but we can do QA. We're developers. We don't have the patience. We don't have like the workflow. So we did what we could. We hired some outsourcers that did a terrible job, so we stopped working with them. And like it wasn't stable. It's not something that you can release to the public and say we have a coin. Um, and I was really tired back then. I was so tired of doing things that are not my job, that are not my qualification. And they were my job because everything was my job, but they were not my qualification. I'm always outside my comfort zone, and I always have to speak with people, and that's a lot of anxiety to me. Um, so there was one day I returned from a vacation. I opened up my work and I look at it. I can't do it anymore. I just I cannot. I cannot. I look at it. I feel bad. I have to go to the toilet. I can't do it anymore. Um, and that was quite harsh. And I started thinking like, okay, what am I doing? It's not getting released anyway, and I'm out of morale. I don't have like any wind in my sails. It seems like Jonathan is also not really much into that anymore. He's looking into like further projects. Like there was a time I thought he has to go back, like he has to go on a plane to Silicon Valley and get some more money so that we can do QA. But he wasn't going to do that. Uh, I thought we need a VP of R&D like to manage all that. He said, no, we have a community. Then we launched testnet, and testnet like crashes. So he comes to me and asks me, what's going on? Why does testnet crash? And I say, I don't know. Ask your VP of R&D. Oh, you don't have one. Okay, ask your community. There's no community yet. Somebody needs to do QA. We don't have the resources to do QA. We don't have the people. We don't have the money. So that's why testnet crashes. um, and then I look like at my funds and I say, okay, I have like savings for 2 or 3 years to not work, and then like it was natural to me. I go study music. I always wanted to learn music. I tried to like learn music theory a couple of times on like Coursera and stuff like that, and it never sticked. And I was always making music as a hobby, so it was quite natural that if I need to recover, then I go study music. Um, now I want to just go back a little bit to the Casper story. Luckily, Stas was the only one who said, "There's no way we're closing shop without releasing. We'll release something. It will suck. It will be terrible, but we are releasing Magnet." And then we came up with this scheme that we will release mainnet, but we are going to make the mining random so that the coin has no value, so that nobody wants to sell it or is able to sell it. So we did release this. Well, they released this. I was already out. I was studying music back then. And it was a shit show for a few months. Back then, I remember going, and I came back to help them because like I couldn't leave them like with those burning servers. So I remember coming to the university, opening my laptop. Teacher is talking about something. I code Caspa. Uh, and then they ends, and I'm the only one left in class because I still code Caspa, but everybody went home already, and I'm in that. Uh,
I don't really think a lot of people in the community really know about this story. Uh, Mike, it's something that you have done that I think everyone is really proud of you. And thank you for building such a beautiful code and saving Caspa from dying at that moment. Because if it were not you, I think the code would have crashed, and it would not be where it is currently. And it is all only because of you. And I think everyone should give you the credit for it,
well,
for
thank
skipping
you
your music classes and like fixing the code.
very much. I think that like there were good people on it, except me, and they would have been able to fix that themselves. But like, it's not fair. They are the ones missing sleep, and I'm not. So I missed sleep a few times as well for the sake of it's my baby. I wasted 4 years or 5 years of my life building this thing. I couldn't let it die. Uh, and yeah, it was in my interest, and yeah, I'm happy that I had the privilege and the right to be the person that can help him.
Um, I would say, Mac, this is the reason why I really believe that Caspa is going to be the next big thing, because the team considers it as its baby, right?
It
And
is
you don't let your
definitely.
baby, you don't let your baby die.
Uh,
You
yeah, and you don't cheat with it.
nurture it.
You don't cut loose corners. You do it properly. Otherwise, the baby will grow up badly, and you don't want that.
So, as an ending note, do you think Mike is Mike going to come back to its baby again? Maybe in a few years. Should the community wait?
I wouldn't be waiting for that. I really enjoy my career in music right now. I'm starting to be very successful as a composer. I had my first composition performed last year by a very high profile musician, um, and I really enjoy doing that. Um, Sometimes my fingers scratch a little bit, and then I find myself doing some programming. But like to get back into Caspa, I will need a much bigger time commitment that I don't think I'm going to be able to provide anytime soon, just because I think that I definitely can make much more money in Caspa, but I think I made enough money, and I think like to make the world a better place right now, music is more
Absolutely.
important. Caspa is definitely important. We need to drive the banks out of business, and it is part of the future. And I'm very happy that I had my part into doing that. But I think it is in good hands, and I think that the community that sprang out of these early days. What I was going to say is that right after mainnet launch, some from somewhere we have QA people that are doing that for free, uh, and uh, and then suddenly it's stable, and we suddenly have developers that study the code, and they begin contributing core code, and that's marvelous. So I don't think Caspa needs me anymore. And I kind of don't think I need Caspa. Like, I love the community, but I don't need it as my occupation. But
The baby has grown.
sorry?
Let's say the baby has grown. Let's say the baby has grown and is
Yeah,
still growing.
yeah, I'm still a proud parent. I will visit your bar mitzvah. But it's not my job anymore, and I'm happy this way. I always like to look forward and keep my horizons open. I'm not sure I'm going to do music for the rest of my life, although I wouldn't mind that. This is what I'm striving to right now. Maybe I don't know what I'm gonna do. Maybe I'll raise elephants in Tanzania in a few years.
On that note, Mike, thank you so much for giving us your precious time.
Thank you for
I'm
having
sure
me.
the viewers would I'm sure the viewers would get a lot of value out of this discussion. I mean, a lot of stories have come up that I'm sure no one really knows.
Yeah,
And I'm sure when Jonathan sees this, or even Shai or Michael, anyone who sees this, they'll be like happy to remember those early days when
yeah,
you guys were like struggling with crashing servers, test nets breaking, and good times.
yeah. Good time.
And
We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun back then. Jonathan once said that like our company is made of people who have no idea how to do their job, but still do it with love.
I mean, that's what it is, man. That's how the world is built.
Yep.
And a lot of love from the community. Thank you for giving us your time, Mike.
Thank you very
And
much.
let's me, you, and Shai connect, and let's do a jam together on our guitars, and let the community know that we still
Absolutely.
are together.
I'm on the drums. You're on the guitar. I'm on the drums.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. Have a
Thank
nice
you. Bye
one.
bye.